People like Narrowcast Media Group have enabled us to really get exposed to so many people globally.
Neil and Catherine and all of your associates, we simply couldn't have done it without you.
Karen and Neil Stewart and their team are professional conference organisers for their exceptional efforts to have made this such a successful event. So I'd like to give them a warm round of applause. And if your organisations are ever organising an event, we highly recommend them.
These awards, as you know, are a celebration of achievement, effort, change, innovation, management, insight, and the many other traits necessary to sustain a proud profession like midwifery and consistent services in maternity.
We invite people to nominate a colleague or a student or a manager, whatever, where they think that person's real trailblazers.
And it's really a celebration of all that's good in midwifery and maternity care.
They recognise individuals, they recognise teams, management and educators. Anyone who values excellence and makes improvements. They are essentially a celebration of all of your achievements. So, shall we get on with it? What you do with your day-to-day lives, I just admire you hugely. If you do want to nominate a colleague, a friend, maybe yourself, please speak to the organisers and visit the website, and I really hope that we'll see you at that.
Okay, now the first award is... What's
Nothing, I don't know.
What we're looking at in both nursing and midwifery is how we can address both recruitment and retention.
We're very lucky in many ways in Scotland that we do still prioritise and value postnatal care, but that doesn't mean that we couldn't do better.
That's a wonderful part in the world to be and to live in.
Speaking as a clinician, I'm going to say, you know, what are you waiting for?
Welcome to Matflix, video streaming from maternity experts. My name is Dr. Jenny Hall. I am the box sets curator at Matflix, a fellow of the Royal College of Midwives and a former editor of The Practising Midwife. At Matflix, we bring together videos of talks from top maternity experts into box sets to support your continued professional development, study and revalidation. It is a perfect study accompaniment for midwives, maternity professionals, midwifery students and anyone thinking about a career in the maternity services. My job is bringing together the latest thinking area by area so you do not have to. Not only do you get the video of brilliant talks and relevant content in thematic box sets, you also get access to the audio version so you can listen on the commute or while you walk the dog. Plus links to the latest research in the relevant field, government policy documents, the presenter's PowerPoint and more besides. Sign up to Matflix now for the best video streaming from maternity experts.
We have had a 40% caesarean section rate in the National Maternity Hospital. That is major abdominal surgery.
Around 40,000 mums did not return to work in 2022. It's even more relevant if you're a mum who's experienced birth trauma.
We spend more money on litigation than we currently spend on the maternity services. It's bonkers.
It's in all of our interests, and particularly the government, to improve maternity services.
We can't achieve our mission unless we bring parents and professionals together.
A revolution needs to happen. We need to start working together.
I know it's a hard time, but for goodness sake, it's the best profession in the world.
Be proud to be midwives, be proud of the job that we do, and continue to celebrate our successes.
Midwives make a difference to women every single day, and let's not lose that. It's more important than anything.
People like Narrowcast Media Group have enabled us to really get exposed to so many people globally.
Neil and Catherine and all of your associates, we simply couldn't have done it without you.
Karen and Neil Stewart and their
People like Narrowcast Media Group have enabled us to really get exposed to so many people globally.
Neil and Catherine and all of your associates, we simply couldn't have done it without you.
Karen and Neil Stewart and their team are professional conference organisers for their exceptional efforts to have made this such a successful event. So I'd like to give them a warm round of applause. And if your organisations are ever organising an event, we highly recommend them.
These awards, as you know, are a celebration of achievement, effort, change, innovation, management, insight, and the many other traits necessary to sustain a proud profession like midwifery and consistent services in maternity.
We invite people to nominate a colleague or a student or a manager, whatever, where they think that person's real trailblazers.
And it's really a celebration of all that's good in midwifery and maternity care.
They recognise individuals, they recognise teams, management and educators. Anyone who values excellence and makes improvements. They are essentially a celebration of all of your achievements. So, shall we get on with it? What you do with your day-to-day lives, I just admire you hugely. If you do want to nominate a colleague, a friend, maybe yourself, please speak to the organisers and visit the website, and I really hope that we'll see you at that.
and welcome everybody to this week's Maternity Midwifery Hour. And this is Series 17 and Session 8. And my name's Sue MacDonald, and I'm the curator for the Maternity and Midwifery Hours and the Maternity and Midwifery Festivals. And it's my pleasure to be chairing the session this evening, which is going to be very exciting. And I know it is, and very interesting because it's full of lots of information. And we're joined by Professor David Churchill. And just because we do always do this to our speakers, we always invite them to share a moment of the week. So welcome, David. You have a wonderful moment of the week.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for inviting me, Sue. A moment of the week for me was when I received a video today from one of my ex-patients who had a premature baby who was born, and she was tiny when born, about 675 grams, and we managed to keep her going for about an extra month to 6 weeks. And there she was today, 9 months, supporting herself, smiling, giggling, and laughing. So that was my moment of the week for you today.
And that's a lovely moment of the week. It's just amazing to think of such a little baby being like a proper size and giggling and it's hard work.
Absolutely.
Starting at that 600 gram baby.
Absolutely. And it was a great tribute to the teamwork for a maternity unit to be able to see that, because there's so much negativity these days. We forget the really good things that go on, and the babies and the mums that we treat that do really well and are grateful.
Well, thank you so much for sharing that, because that is a little kind of antidote to some of what's happening in the media, especially in the media at the moment, and that's lovely to share. So thank you so much, David. Now we're going to let our speaker have a little rest, because he's got a lot to say from about 7:10. And I just want to say a big welcome to new people this evening, because I know we've got new people who have dialed in, as well as our old friends with us this evening. And I always need to say this, where we came from, the Maternity and Midwifery Hour, because we were born at the beginning of the COVID first lockdown in England in 2020. And I kind of think, gosh, that's 5 years ago, and it seems forever sometimes. And then something will happen and you think it wasn't that long ago. Now, have we learned anything? I'm not sure. Maybe we have. I hope so. But what we did learn is that midwives, maternity care support workers, student midwives, and loads of people within the maternity services really were not able to go to, well, nobody couldn't go to study days, couldn't go to conferences or festivals. And therefore, we felt we needed something, even a little something like an hour a week with some content and some professional development opportunities, and linking midwives and student midwives and everyone else working in the maternity unit, because we have had the whole multidisciplinary team who can make it in every now and then. So we started this and we've carried on. And obviously, initially, we were looking a lot at COVID-19 because we didn't know very much about it at that time. But we also were looking at what we were doing within the service to make sure women and babies were cared for and as safely as possible. And also within education to make sure student midwives were catered for at that time. So it was a very busy time. And I have to say, when I think back, there were some incredibly creative and clever things that were done in order to make sure the care was continuing well. And that was fantastic. We should celebrate that also. Now, the other thing I always need to remember, everything we do on the Maternity Midwifery Forum, we record. And that means if you should have a power cut this evening, don't panic, because you can catch up later, because this is all recorded and will be accessible after tonight. And that makes sure that you're going to learn some things as you do every single week. Some of it you'll learn quickly. Some of it is you might have to think about a bit, and you might want to replay the hour again. And that's good, because you can replay it with your colleagues, with your fellow students, whatever, because that will help cement the learning that you're going to make this evening, and also share the information out. And we love to share the Maternity and Midwifery Hour. So please do, when you get your link, either Friday morning or next Wednesday with the newsletter. Also, I'm going to say this is very good if I mean, all of these productions and recordings are kept by Matflix, and you'll see in the resources list a link to Matflix. So if you are part of one of the institutions who has a subscription, very easy. You can just go in and look for what you're wanting. You can have your own personal subscription. It's not very expensive. It's a little bit addictive, I have to tell you, because if you go in there looking for something, say for your revalidation, or if you're doing a project at work, or you're doing an assignment for university, and you want to update on a particular area, fantastic resource, because I find listening to someone talking about a project or a piece of research makes it really come alive. It's much easier to digest and make sense of sometimes than reading, because we're all busy and we're trying to juggle about a million things. So have a look at the Matflix. But the health warning is, once you start digging around and having a look at things, you can spend quite a bit of time and energy, and it's nice, but just be aware that it might take some time as well. Now, in terms of the news, I found it quite interesting. There's a report from Mumsnet showing that some women were seeking better units. You know, all these ways we're having almost like grading for the best units to go to, which is all very well. But if you're not one of the best units, you might still be doing very good care and providing very good care and have fantastic practitioners. But some people are looking for the best unit, and having difficulty, because obviously if everybody wants to go to the best unit, there's not going to be necessarily room for them. So that was quite interesting. And you can find that through on, I think it was in the Observer. I've put the link into the resources. The other thing is there's a survey from the Royal College of Midwives for newly qualified midwives, and they're looking at how easy it is to get jobs, because you remember the last few months it has been quite difficult for students in getting jobs because there haven't been jobs, even though we need lots of midwives. Mad, I know. The other thing I want to say is congratulations to Laura Godfrey-Isaacs and Lily Williams, who've just, they're just about to publish tomorrow a graphic guide to pregnancy and birth. Really unique. It's really interesting. And you can see, you can get sort of edited highlights of it. It's got lots of inclusive images and it's very accessible. Lots and lots of pictures, and really helpful for some mums and also some midwives to use to sort of point mums to. So quite good for dipping into. And also I've also put on the resource list the report about not just an option, and I know I mentioned it a couple of weeks ago, interpreting as an essential component of safe maternity and neonatal care, that one. It's not that big a report, but it's really important. And it's been supported by Sands and Tommy's policy unit. And it's basically, it's not a luxury. Having good interpreters ensures that women get the proper care and obviously their babies as well as their families. So access it. It's not that many pages. I think it was about 38 to 39 pages. Really useful for you. Okay. And I think that I'm going to cease there, because I'm going to now introduce our speaker this evening, because we're going to be looking at primary prevention of maternal anemia to avoid preterm delivery especially and other adverse outcomes. And we have Professor David Churchill to discuss how early prevention and management of maternal anemia can reduce preterm births and improve outcomes. And he's also going to share a huge and very exciting PANDA project. That's also on your resource list, the website, which is very, very useful to look at. And David is a consultant obstetrician, professor of obstetrics at the University of Wolverhampton, also honorary senior clinical lecturer at the University of Birmingham, and honorary research fellow at the National Perinatal Epidemiology Unit. And his special interest, well, you'll see what his special interest areas are, but it's in particularly maternal and fetal medicine, looking after women with medical conditions, including diabetes and hypertension, renal disease and endocrine problems, intrapartum care, and level 3 fetal medicine ultrasound scans, including invasive diagnostic procedures. And he actively practices direct intrapartum care on the labour ward, real practitioner, of course. So welcome, David. Thank you so much for coming this evening. The screen is now all yours.
Thank you, Sue. Thanks for the introduction. That makes me feel really old. All those things that you've said I do and I have done and did in the past. It's a pleasure to be able to present to your audience, and what I'm going to do is to take you through what's occupied probably the last 10 years of my working career, researching a problem that is very common. And initially, we think, well, it's easy to treat, just give somebody iron, corrects the anemia, and everything goes away. But what I hope to show is that it's a lot more complex than that. And we really do need to be thinking more deeply about iron deficiency anemia in pregnancy so that we can provide the best care for our mums and, in fact, our babies. So I will be taking you on a bit of the journey that I went on. And at the end, we'll be talking about the trial that we are now running around the country. So first of all, anemia. I'm sure everybody has a picture of a patient who is anemic. They're pale, tired, lethargic, and generally feel miserable. What it actually is the number of blood cells are reduced in the bloodstream in basic terms. There are too few cells, and also in the cells, hemoglobin is what we talk about, and hemoglobin is the protein holding iron, is at a lower concentration. So those red blood cells, which have less smaller, fewer, and have less hemoglobin in terms of concentration, are not able to carry as much oxygen as they should. Now, in pregnancy, there's an additional complicating factor, and that is because the blood volume increases in pregnancy, the definition of anemia and the thresholds apply change across a pregnancy. So early on in the pregnancy, in what we call the first trimester, the threshold is set at 110 grams per litre. Below that, one is classed as anemic. Then in the second and third trimester, it falls to 105 grams because by then the blood volume has increased and diluted the blood cells. And in the postpartum period, it's set at 100 grams. Now, these occasionally change, and WHO reviews them from time to time and alters the thresholds. But these are the thresholds that are used in Britain currently. So what's the burden of anemia? Well, it is a huge global problem. There's 1.6 billion people worldwide who are anemic, which is a quarter of the world's population. And 30 to 40% of preschool children are anemic. Now, in a UK study, 10 years ago now, or over 10 years ago, 14 years ago, when 11 units were surveyed, they found that a third of women developed iron deficiency anemia during pregnancy in the antenatal period. In 2020, we used the NHS Blood and Transplant Services audit facilities and audited again around the UK to see what the prevalence was, to see if it had been reduced. And unfortunately, what we found, it hadn't. Still, about a third of women become pregnancy. And in the postpartum period, we found that 21% of the whole cohort were anemic. Now, we weren't able to get all the women tested, and of those who were tested, it was at 40%. So there is probably a much higher level of anemia after a woman has given birth. So what do we know? We know that it affects a large proportion of our population during pregnancy. It is most commonly, but not uniquely, due to a deficiency in iron, and we know that it is treatable and preventable. It's most often diagnosed, though, in the third trimester, and this is because of the way iron is used and the development of the placenta and the baby, which I will come to later. The diagnosis is complicated, not least because of the problems of hemodilution, but also because the diagnosis is not mapped accurately against outcomes. So the causes of anemia, as I've mentioned, iron deficiency is the primary cause, but there are others. So folate deficiency and vitamin B12 deficiency also cause anemia, but they are different types of anemia. The cells in those two types of anemia are larger, although they are fewer, and they have a different pattern. They are much less common than iron deficiency. There are also other groups of women who have special conditions like sickle cell disease and thalassemia, or infectious diseases, which is obviously mainly occurs in developing parts of the world, like where they get malaria and parasitic infections, and they have much more chronic problems with anemia. And they are not readily amenable to simple solutions like iron tablets. For example, sickle cell disease often requires blood transfusions, and infectious diseases, obviously, again, as I mentioned, in the developing world, whilst they can be cleared, they often recur. So back to our own population, what problems does anemia cause? Well, most women, I'm sure those of you who have and care for women in the antenatal period know that when they are anemic, they start to complain of lethargy and dizziness and fatigue. And they also talk of brain fog, which is an altered cognitive ability. More seriously, though, they suffer when at time of birth from postpartum hemorrhage. Now, this is not just because there are fewer red blood cells, and if they bleed, they do run into problems more quickly, which is true, but it's also because anemia itself affects the coagulation pathway. So if you are an anemic, when you bleed, you will bleed more and you will have a bigger effect because you have less blood volume to cope with the bleed that's occurred. We also know that women suffer more from infections, and sepsis is much more likely in somebody who is anemic. And finally, when we look into the postnatal period, there is good evidence that anemia, or an iron deficiency anemia, causes postnatal depression. We know that a deficiency of iron will alter the neurotransmitters in the brain, and as such predisposes people to depression, and in the case of pregnant women, postnatal depression. And finally, there are also it impacts on breastfeeding, which is reduced. For the baby itself, it can affect the growth, and we know that overall babies of women who are anemic have low birth weight. They can be born prematurely. They can be affected by the PPHs that the mums have. And overall, the levels of mortality in women who have anemia are higher. And I will come on to show you some of the work and the results that we have found earlier in our 10-year journey. And finally, what's less well known, but evidence is now emerging, is that the infants of women who have had anemia in pregnancy also have delayed development. Now, this is because that in the first 6 months of life, if they are being breastfed, they are getting very little iron. And so the babies and children rely upon the iron that's transferred during pregnancy. So just a little bit first about iron, what it is and why it's important. So we know it goes to the formation of hemoglobin and carries the oxygen within the red blood cells. But it also has two other very important functions. The first is energy production in the mitochondria, which are the power stations of all our cells. And iron is required in the process that goes to create the fuel energy in terms of what we call ATP. Thirdly, it also is vital in the repair and translation of DNA. So our protein production is impaired when somebody is iron deficient, and DNA repair is also impaired. This has obviously serious consequences for cells at the same time when one's trying to recover from, say, surgery or an illness. So what are the iron requirements during pregnancy? Well, a non-pregnant woman will require 0.8 milligrams of iron a day to keep her iron levels at the correct level for her function. In pregnancy, though, by the end of pregnancy, she needs nearly 10 times more than that, at 8 milligrams of iron a day. And that's mainly because she has a big increase in her red blood cell volume of about 40%. And also the fetus and the placenta require large amounts of iron for their development. So in the third trimester and the late second trimester, the requirement for iron is extremely large and so needs to be delivered. Where is iron in the body, though? Well, it's stored in two forms. The main form is in ferritin, and the other is in hemosiderin. Now, the iron is stored in the liver and within cells. But the problem with ferritin, and we all talk and measure ferritin, is it can be influenced by several factors, and those are three there. But the big one is it is influenced by pregnancy itself, because pregnancy is a mildly inflammatory state, particularly in the early stages. So the evidence for the normal ranges of ferritin in pregnancy are poor, and this is why we rely on hemoglobin to diagnose iron deficiency anemia. Now, having said that, the guidelines do use ferritin, but the evidence for which they set the thresholds isn't good. And so we need to bear that in mind when we talk about treatment and prevention. Now, the big thing is, what do our women think about taking iron? Actually, they are a bit confused about it. They are open to social influences and are very much take the advice from anywhere they can about what to do and when to take the iron. The consequences of taking the iron are there. They can sometimes get side effects. So they try to use their diet to increase the iron intake without taking medication. The sources of information can be conflicting, and so that leads to them being confused. They also talk to us when we surveyed them about the medical language that was used. So it was conflicting and sometimes information that they couldn't understand. We also talked to women who weren't taking iron and found out what they thought. They were relying heavily upon the diet and supplements that they were taking. And most of our pregnant ladies now take multivitamins with iron in. They found that it was difficult. They thought it was going to be difficult to take tablets and to arrange it around their life. And finally, their understanding of anemia was actually poor. They knew it was a problem, but it didn't think it was a life-threatening issue or had long-term consequences. So there is a lot of information out there that confuses people, and we do need to be more consistent in what we say. So can we increase the iron in our diets and avoid anemia? Well, in pregnancy, the answer is no, unfortunately. We can deliver more by improving our diet. So broccoli, meat if you're not a vegetarian, and various other things will improve the amount of iron delivered, but it will never meet the requirements in the third trimester of a pregnancy. And this is why pregnant women rely on their iron stores to deliver enough iron later on in pregnancy to the baby and the placenta. But we also need to remember that it's inhibited by certain foods. Absorption's inhibited by certain foods, such as tea. Drugs as well, like omeprazole and antacids, inhibit its absorption. So when we're giving iron, we need to be able to give good advice on how to take it, which is on an empty stomach, probably about an hour before eating or taking any medications. The absorption can be enhanced by taking vitamin C. So a drink of orange juice at the same time will help to improve absorption of iron. There are triggers in the body which will increase absorption. And without going into the technicalities of it, the liver is the control organ for absorption of iron. There's a protein called hepcidin, which, if it increases, stops the absorption of iron in the gastrointestinal tract. And it was thought that this could be used to really diagnose women who were short of iron in pregnancy. But unfortunately, we've done some work to show that that is not going to be the case. It is affected, hepcidin, by the iron stores falling, but also itself, like ferritin, by inflammation and pregnancy. Now, it is lowered and suppressed in pregnancy because obviously a pregnant woman needs more iron and needs to absorb more. So there's some physiological mechanism that goes on in a normal pregnancy to increase absorption, and it prevents hepcidin from interfering with that. So what about if we take a tablet of iron? What are the adverse effects? Well, they're well known as heartburn and indigestion, nausea and vomiting and black stools. Rarely there is anaphylaxis, but what people tend not to know is that there may be an increase in the risk of infections. It may alter the gut microbiome, which is the bacterial content, and it may cause preeclampsia. But the evidence for all of those is not good. It's poor. But as you'll see later on in this talk, we are going to monitor that in our trial to see if there is any signal that it may cause problems like that. So I'm going to move a bit into the sciencey area. And as I mentioned, we've been doing work on this over 10 years. And initially, we believed it was going to be easy to sort this problem out, just to get the treatment right. But what we found out is that's not the case. It's much more complex than we thought. So this is a bit of a warning, I'm afraid, for the sciencey bit that's coming, but I'll try to make it understandable. Our first piece of work was done when we looked at 2 years' worth of babies that were born in Wolverhampton. And what we found when we looked at the stillbirth rates was that for moderate to severe anemia, the stillbirth rate was 4 times higher than the background rate if you had moderate to severe anemia, which is a hemoglobin of less than 100. The units have changed since this work was done. And when I was first called about this, because we were collaborating with Oxford, and Oxford rang me up and said, we're sending up the results, what do you think? And I looked at them and I thought, I don't believe this. So I forgot about it for a week. And then when I went back and looked again, I decided there is something here. And we thought we ought to find out more. So we got a second data set from London, Guy's and St Thomas's, and we increased the numbers to 14,000, and we found exactly the same. And this was incredible. We usually get excited about something if the stillbirth rate increases by about 1.5 to 2, but this was a fourfold increase in stillbirth rate. So we started to look why this was, and we thought, well, this is probably due to the oxygen carrying capacity being lower, causing babies to be small, or causing them to have mums to have infections that causes preterm births. And this very complex slide, don't worry about it, it isn't those. It does not operate in the first trimester. If you're anemic, it doesn't operate through those mechanisms. There is an unknown mechanism of why, and if you're anemic in the first trimester, it increases your risk of stillbirth, but we don't know why. If you're later on in pregnancy, though, it probably does work through the mechanisms of low birth weight and prematurity. So there is a difference. The point here is there's a difference as to when you become anemic, as to what the mechanism is for being associated with this outcome of stillbirth. And we looked also then at low birth weight and preterm birth, and we found exactly the same relationship. So at the stage of pregnancy, you get anemia means that there is a different relationship in terms of what's happening and how it's causing problems. So another study we did was, because as I mentioned in the early days, we thought, well, we need to just treat this properly. It's badly treated generally. We found that from our national survey. So what we did was we looked at a cohort of ladies who had anemia in pregnancy. We took them out of the normal antenatal clinic, and we treated them almost religiously as we could by the British Society of Haematological Guidelines. Now, what that guideline says is that you treat women with iron, and then 2 to 4 weeks later, test them to see if the hemoglobin is increased, and there should be an increase by greater than 10 grams per litre. And what we found was that when we treated these women, and this was high dose iron now, 3 times a day, the number of women that were responding to the iron was 33%. So only a third of women increased their iron by the requisite 10 grams per litre. However, as you know, the threshold for anemia is lower in pregnancy, in later pregnancy. So we thought, well, some women were normalizing their hemoglobin, although it wasn't a 10-gram rise. So we classed those as responders too. But of those who we classed as responders, the number that responded was roughly around, there you go, 58 or 60%. So we were still finding that a third of women, or between 2/3 and a third of women, were not responding to oral iron during pregnancy. So this was telling us that even by sticking closely to the guidance, we were not able to prevent anemia in all pregnant women. What about side effects? Was it due to side effects? Well, not really. There were no significant differences in the side effects apart from black stools, and which were higher in women who didn't respond. So they were the ones who were not absorbing the iron. Now, these were women who were told how to take the iron, given all the appropriate advice, and so had the best chance of responding. So we were disappointed in treatment. So finally, we started what we call now the PANDA program. And we wanted to see if we could prevent iron deficiency anemia in pregnancy and improve the outcomes across the board in terms of low birth weight, preterm birth, and stillbirths. And our pilot study was to find the correct dose of iron to give to have the potential to do that. And these are the 5 hospitals that were involved in recruiting 300 women into this trial. What we found was, and we tested 3 doses of iron. One was a daily dose, one was alternate days, and one was 3 times a week. And what we found was that they all generally kept the hemoglobin higher, and they all had good levels of keeping above the threshold for anemia. So 95, 91, and 96%. However, when we looked at it more closely, it was the daily dose that was delivering the most iron. Because what we found, now I'm missing slide, is that when we looked at the number of tablets taken, the daily dose was 5 tablets a week on average, whereas the others fell down to 3 and 2. Now, why is that important? Well, if we wanted to see a clinical effect, we need to know that the iron is being absorbed and is being used. And we have laboratory data now that shows that alternate day iron and 3 times a week iron does not deliver the appropriate levels of iron into the body. The women react and they show changes that mean the body is requesting more iron. So an international panel actually looked at this data and said, you need to use the daily dose in your big trial. And this was an international panel that actually had connections to the WHO, who produced the original guidance. Now, we looked at the side effects again. So going back to the side effects of iron, and we found that when you looked at side effects, and we looked at all 4, so this is just to show you the anemia side effect, nausea, the side effect of nausea. We looked at nausea, indigestion, heartburn, and constipation. And when we looked at between the different regimens for taking iron, there was actually no difference across the first and second trimesters into the third trimester for the pattern of side effects. The women were getting the symptoms before they took iron, and the iron made some of them slightly worse, but the changes were no different. So if you were only taking 3 tablets of iron a week, it was just the same as if you were taking daily iron. Now, we thought about this quite deeply and think that probably what's happening is that ladies are suffering from these symptoms before they ever get to take iron. They probably just assume they're part of a normal pregnancy and put up with them. And when they get iron, they get slightly worse. They tell their midwife, who then says it's down to the iron, quite understandably making that assumption. And so the iron gets a bad reputation and gets stopped. And it may be that that's part of the problem for treatment. The other thing that was happening, because we checked what was going on with the women and how they were going throughout the pregnancy, later on in pregnancy, they were more likely to forget to take the tablets in the alternate and 3 times a week arms rather than the daily arm. So, going more specifically to treatment now, we know oral iron works. It will increase the hemoglobin, or it will maintain the hemoglobin. But there are other options, such as intravenous iron and blood transfusion. The intravenous iron is extremely expensive. And over a 10-year period, the use, and I only have Australia data here, has gone from $1 million to $80 million. The current strategy for treatment, as I've said, isn't working. About a third of women are still remaining anemic despite being given the appropriate treatment. And it may be that it's due to side effects, or it may be that they just forget to take the tablets. The timing and the frequency of the dosage, therefore, we would say, for our purposes, was once a day. So I'll just go on. But the caution, and the caution with this is obviously I've mentioned there's concern that there may be some adverse effects. But as I said, I don't want to overplay these because I don't want us to worry any of our pregnant women. We've used iron for decades, and the work that's gone on to produce these theories has been rather poor. So I think I've made a case that prevention is better than cure because of all the problems we have with treatment and iron. I think I've made a case that our pilot data shows that it's a daily dose of iron that we need to test. And it's not just me that says this or us in Panda. The Americans in their Preventative Services Task Force came out and said the evidence for screening and prevention is poor and there needs to be trials. So hence now the Panda trial. This is where we are giving, this is a double-blind randomized control trial. We're evaluating the clinical and cost effectiveness of a primary prevention strategy for iron deficiency anemia with a single daily dose of oral iron, which is 200 milligrams of ferrous sulfate, which delivers 65 milligrams of elemental iron. Most pregnant women are actually eligible for this, as long as they're not anemic or have one of the very rare conditions that can cause problems with too much iron, or iron itself can affect their diseases, such as ulcerative colitis or Crohn's disease. And we estimate that as a minimum, 70% of women in the first trimester will be eligible to participate. We have matched, obviously, the tablets. It's a double-blind trial, so there's a placebo and a ferrous sulfate tablet. The women don't know what they're getting, neither do we, and the tablets are identical. That's just to say what I've said. The schedule of assessments is very simple. We have made this trial as easy as possible. We use 90, probably 95% is routinely collected data from the baseline through to 6 weeks post-delivery. We do not alter the management of the pregnant ladies themselves. We do not interfere with whatever the midwifery or obstetric teams do, and there are no extra blood tests. The only extra things for the women who participate are at 28 weeks, they are asked to fill in some quality of life questionnaires, and the same at 6 weeks post-delivery. Otherwise, we collect routine data. And as I said, we are monitoring whether they get preeclampsia or infections or sepsis, because we have to know absolutely that if this works, and it does reduce preterm birth, low birth weight and stillbirths, and even PPHs and things, we have to know it's absolutely safe before it's recommended to the pregnant population. So those are our outcomes, as I mentioned there. We're also looking at the health economics, and we're also checking adherence, because in part of our earlier work, we developed an adherence intervention that helps women to remember to take the tablets and stick with them. There's a big team involved, and this is just some of the team. You'll know some fairly famous people there, Professor Marion Knight being one. And I really ought to acknowledge them, but more so, I need to acknowledge the participating units, of which some of you may be part. We now have 47 hospitals who've joined, and another 10 are in setup. But most importantly, I want to thank our volunteers. We actually have now, at the end of last week, 1,930 women who joined the trial. We need 11,000, so we are a long way off and have a big mountain to climb. But the pregnant women who are doing this purely voluntarily are really the heroes of the trial. And this is really citizen science in the real sense. And I think we need to pay tribute to them. It also shows what commitment there is from maternity units around the country to finding out a really important an answer to a really important question. And as we mentioned earlier on, with so much negativity around, it's easy to forget the good work that's done. And I recognise that the units that are participating are actually going over and above. And again, I want to say the thank you to them, as well as the participants from all the team in the Panda. If there are people out there who want to join, we're still open for new sites. please visit the website, which you see there. You'll get more information. We try to make that website reactive, so if you want any of the papers that I've mentioned today, they're there in PDF forms that can be downloaded. I'll stop there though and see if there are any questions, and thank you, Sue.
Fantastic, thank you so much. That's really, I'm scribbling away all of these, because some of the facts are quite stunning in a way, aren't they? I mean, the idea that all of the 25% of the world is anemic is, I think, quite a stunning. I mean, you can understand it because there's a lot of poverty and hunger about, but it's sort of quite kind of stark in that way.
Yes.
So now, those of you out there, if you have some questions, do put them in now. If you're wanting to apply or have your unit part of the project, you have the link to the Panda project, and that was on the list of resources also. And it's always worth asking and expressing an interest, even if you may or may not get selected. I don't know what the selection criteria might be, David.
We're taking all comers, actually. It's
Everybody.
It's such a huge number that we need.
Yeah.
We don't refuse people. We think it's a collaboration. This is a collaboration. It shows the best of maternity units around the NHS, we're not rejecting anyone. We're just looking for that. We really want the whole population to be involved. So we're not looking to limit it. So we want people from all the ethnic minorities. We want people of different socioeconomic backgrounds, different health needs. If it's to work, it has to work for everybody.
And I noticed that one of the early discussion you were talking about was that people were confused about, and I think you've illustrated the possible confusion. So if women are included in the project, do they get given a sort of package of, okay, this is what it's about, this is why, so therefore they're getting information that will make things clearer?
Yeah, absolutely. Our adherence intervention is part of our participant information, and they're available as videos to the women. If they want, they see them before they ever consent and agree to participate. And if they want to download them, they too are available on the website. So they get advice on how to take the iron. They get advice on how to remember to take the iron, the best way to manage the situation in taking the iron. A lot of work's gone into that, what is essentially a behavioural intervention to help the women to adhere to the treatment. Yeah, there's a lot of information there for them to use, written, verbal, and, as I said, visual media.
Because I think it's interesting to think of nature not getting it quite right, in a way, when you're saying diet doesn't work.
Well, I think, it probably did years and years and years ago because we were eating a different diet. But now pregnant women rely on having good stores to supply enough iron in the third trimester. So if a woman has pregnancies close together, then the subsequent pregnancies are more likely to be affected by anemia because she's used up her stores.
Yeah, that's an important point. And I guess ultra processed foods and maybe some of the beef burger type meals might not help.
No, I mean, a good diet will help all round for all sorts of reasons, and equally for the amount of iron that's delivered as well. Yes.
No, that's fantastic. So now I did have a question because so the pregnancies needing 8 grams. Now I'm sure people have got more questions than I have, and I think the issue about confusion about iron and the tablets and just taking it. I think that was something that stayed with me a little bit. And the sort of there's going to be a whole group of women who don't actually like taking tablets.
No,
Or think
absolutely.
it's not it's not very oh, it's not good for you because and then every now and then you will get something in the media about you shouldn't take this, you shouldn't take that. And do you find that's an issue in the
We do
project?
get that as a problem, yes.
Mm.
But what we explain is that this is similar to folic acid, which is now widely accepted because it prevent obviously what that does. We're trying to do the same with iron. It's probably more difficult because you do get some problems with side effects, but the potential for benefit is huge. Even a small percentage reduction in our outcomes will mean large numbers of women will benefit from this. The confusion, it's right, because people are told things like, well, if you get a bit of heartburn, take it with some food, or a cup of tea, which will prevent it being absorbed. We even found in the early days, pharmacists, the drug information sheets were saying to take it with food, which actually limits the absorption. So it's confusion that's gone on for a long time. And mainly because I think it's such a common condition, nobody's been really interested in it. It's not been very, it's not been up in the media as a really serious problem that causes all these adverse outcomes, and nobody's bothered to look. It's been staring us in the face, but we just ignore it.
No, I think that's amazing. When you actually look at the possible impact, it does become a much more serious event, doesn't it? Really. Oh, I've got a question coming through now. Forgive me. I have to look at the other side of the screen to see with questions. And we've got Juliet Samuel. Hi, Juliet. How are you? And Juliet says, do the women receive advice on healthy lifestyle? And is it variable for the study, or is it based on a starting minimum blood level as part of the research?
No, they all get the same advice, and that's the women on the placebo as well as the women who are on the iron. So we because we don't know, we give them all the same advice on healthy lifestyle, healthy diet, and how to take the medication. Yeah. So
yeah, I think that I mean for me the food and the tea are key things because you're so used to most drugs you do have to take with food, and cups of tea don't affect the absorption. So it's a big thing. No, that's really
well. There's a lot of people are also given antacids and things which affect absorption as well. So that's another problem.
Yeah, so you'd have to so if the women are on different medications, does that exclude them out if they are having?
Not at all. We just advise them, and this is again at the beginning, we advise them on timing of taking medication as well. Now, we don't stipulate you must take it at 8 o'clock in the morning and not have anything to eat by till 9. We try and work it around their lifestyle so that the intervention on adherence is flexible and adaptable to the woman's lifestyle herself.
And I've got a query about so the staff that you're working with. I wonder if they're all taking iron as well. And that you wouldn't know.
No.
But it's interesting to think of it such an issue throughout the population, and that would include because I mean we're people too, and some of the midwives are going to be getting pregnant and having babies as well, so they'll be thinking about being anemic as well.
Yes, I think that outside of pregnancy, it's a problem, and a problem for other reasons, because people have chronic illnesses which will make them anemic. So there are lots of different reasons why iron deficiency anemia occurs, but again, it's not something that's in the general population, although it's becoming much more reported much more commonly now in the media.
I think it's your issue about it. It's a very, as it's almost like a taken for granted condition.
Yes.
I mean, even from years and years of well, we give women Pregaday or whatever, or all these iron preparations forever. This has gone on forever, and yet when you were talking, I was thinking, well, this is feeling as though we might have been having a bit of a waste of time because we're not getting the timing right, and we're not making sure women understand, and we're not even clear ourselves as practitioners of the importance of it.
No, and I think that occurs in a lot of things we do. We actually just take it for granted that it's always happened like that, and therefore that's what we will do, rather than looking with a critical eye into what we're doing, why are we doing it, and really what is the evidence. And there are a lot of people who do things that are outside of the guidance, and the guidance, I would say, is a bit poor because it's not based on strong evidence, and people are doing it for good reason, and it's mistaken because we think we're doing good, but actually we're not. And that's why I'm passionate about people joining the trial. This will provide evidence that will tell us really what we're doing, and if it's safe and if it's beneficial, whereas otherwise we're just making it up as we go along again.
Yeah, doing things because we've always done it.
Yes.
That's fantastic. Now, we're having a lot of thank yous and a lot of people. There's a lot of discussion going on and not quite so many questions. But actually, and I said to David earlier, you know what I always say, this hour always is the fastest in the week, and it always goes so quickly. And we have reached the end of the hour. Now, I'm going to recommend to you, well, first of all, I'm going to say a big thank you to David for giving up his evening, come and talk to us about the project. And I'm saying to those of you out there, get onto the Panda website and have a look at it and think about, if you're not one of the units included, think about whether it would be useful to the women and babies in your unit. And I just love the citizen science idea, because getting women involved, getting you involved, make sure that you understand better and really a part of it. And we do need to move away from just doing the way things we've always done and getting our evidence base so good and strong. So thank you so much, David. Now I'm going to say also a big thank you to everyone watching and joining us. I'm going to say thank you to Angelo. Now, Angelo is behind the scenes, making sure everything's recorded beautifully, so you will be able to recapture this. And do share it with your colleagues. And if they're in a different unit, share it even more, because we need to. It'd be good to see an expansion. Let's get beyond. Now, David, 1930 women. Let's get it up to this. Now, was it 11,000 or 12,000?
11,020 women to be precise. But
oh, couldn't you have a few more? Would you like a few more? And a few more international, maybe it would be fantastic.
The international people will give us small numbers, but it's the NHS, it's the structure of the NHS and the systems we have that would allow us to meet this target. We are running behind for bureaucratic reasons, but we're convinced that the units who are taking part are recruiting well in the main. So it's not that it's difficult to recruit two. We know that some studies are, but this one is relatively easy.
Fabulous. Well, then let's fight the bureaucracy bit of it. Now, I have one more question. Let me sneak out. This is Nadia Alouez from Algeria. Hi, Nadia. Welcome, welcome, welcome. And Nadia's good question. Is it necessary to correct the anemia before conception of pregnancy and look for the cause?
Yes, that's a really good question, and we have evidence about that. But in short, yes, I think it is, yes.
Fabulous. Nadia, that's a lovely way to finish with a question. Thank you very much, and welcome, and come back next week as well. Now, I'm going to also say resources. For those of you who like the 6 o'clock in the morning, Friday, podcast, it will be available. Otherwise, this will come through on your newsletter next Wednesday. If you don't subscribe to the Maternity and Midwifery newsletters yet, do subscribe. It's free and you get the links really quickly. It's really good. Next week, we're having a special education and student experience edition because it's the National Midwifery Education Festival and Student Midwife Experience Festival based at De Montfort. It's a face-to-face, but also online, accessible online. So if you haven't booked, get booking. There are a few places still available for that. And also there are some places at the Edinburgh Festival, 25th of November. So line up for that one as well. And it just now remains for me to say thank you for coming. Take good care of yourselves and we'll see you this time next week. Take care.
Bye.